Good morning. For this lesson, we're going to look at a very fun method of learning about comparing, adding, and subtracting fractions. You will need some materials, so I'll show them what you need, and then you will need to get ready, pause the video, and come back. Okay, so you will need some paper that are rectangular. You can just sort of split your A4 paper into pieces. Doesn't matter what size they are. And you need some different colors, coloring pens. Okay, if you haven't got them, pause the video now and go get your rectangle paper and coloring pencil ready. Now, once you've got them, we're going to look at some adding and comparing fractions. They're very similar to the previous video about the grid representation. But before that, we need to look at what adding fractions mean, okay? Here's a question on the screen. A fifth plus 2/5. They're fairly straightforward because the denominators are the same. So they're the same sizes. So there's not much complexity in here, but people still get confused of what the answer is. So is the answer 3 pieces, 1, 2, 3, out of 10, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, 3 tenths, 3 out of 10. Or is it 3 pieces out of 5? Pause the video, give it a thought, and keep your answer in the head before we come back. Right, so I think there might be some disagreement as to which answer it is. The important thing to know is in the fraction framework, you need to know what your whole one is, okay? So if you have this whole bar representing a whole number, then 1 out of the 5 is 1/5. Therefore, your whole one is represented by this bar under here. When you add the two fractions together, you are looking at, out of the whole one, how many are colored. Okay, so if we lay them on top of each other, and the outcome is that it's 1, 2, 3 pieces out of the whole one, which is 5 pieces. Yeah, because that bar represents a whole one, not 2 of those bars. 2 of those bars are actually a total of 2 now. So if you want to say, I color 3 squares, and those 3 squares actually represent 3 squares out of only 1 bar, okay? So the answer is 3/5. Okay. If you're happy with that, let's move on to our activity about folding papers to calculate fractions. If I have 2 fractions here, a half and a third, it'll be quite tricky to think about how to put them together. So we know that we need to put these shades in a whole box because that represents the one, okay? So let me try that actually. That's overlapping a bit. So if I do that, I sort of can put that in there, but not exactly, and the cuts are not even, so you can't really figure out how much is shaded, okay? But keep that thought in mind. Let's do a paper fold activity. So if I have a square paper, I'm going to fold it in half. And please follow me doing that as well. And then I'm going to color half of it in yellow, just like the first fraction up there, okay? So if you are doing that, pause the video now and come back and play when you finish coloring half of this fraction. Look, I finished mine. It's quite bright. Can you see? Right. Okay. Now for the third, I'm going to turn it over, and on the other side, instead of folding this way, yeah, I'm going to fold the other way into thirds, like so. So I'll show you this side. I'm going to fold it instead of this first way. I'm going to fold it the other way into thirds. Okay, thirds are slightly trickier because you have to quite make them almost the same size. All right, so I've folded into 3 sections. Okay, so on this side I folded vertically, on this side I folded horizontally into 3 sections, and so I've done my other side yellow. I am going to color in a third, 1 out of the 3 rows here. On this side, green. I'm going to do mine now. You can go do yours and come back when you finish. Pause the video now. Have you finished yours? I have finished mine. So on this side, I have a half. On this side, I have a third. But if you look at all your creases, your paper is actually folded into 6 little squares. Okay? So when we're adding these 2 fractions together, we're going to look at this side. I've got 2 little squares colored in. I'm going to transfer these 2 little squares onto this side. All right? I'll go and do that. Why don't you pause video and you go do that yourself? Have you finished? Mine looks like this. Okay, so what's this fraction that's shaded? We can see it's 3 yellow squares plus 2 green squares out of total of 6. So the final answer is 5, 6. So let's look at what actually happened in the maths here of this paper fold method. If you look at the screen on the right side, I have my a half on originally being one of the large blocks. But after I folded my paper the other way, I've changed this fraction into 3 squares out of 6. So using our equivalent fraction knowledge, the denominator has multiplied by 3 to become 6. We have to do that same thing for the numerator. Therefore, our new fraction is 3, 6. Our third has become 2 out of 6 because I am multiplying the denominator by 2. I'm doing the same thing for the numerator multiplied by 2. 2, 6. And when we're adding these 2 fractions, we're basically putting all these little squares together. 1, 2, 3 plus 1, 2. Answer is 5. And our final answer is 5, 6. Now, we have this piece of paper, and I'd like you to take out your maths book and put this work in as an example. So if you write your example down, stick that piece of paper just like so in your math book and write down the working out exactly like what it is on the screen. Pause the video, and when you finish, come back. Have you finished? So just double check that you've got all the writings down. I'd really like to insist on writing those arrows and the multiply those arrows and the multiplying sign into your book, and I'd use the same color code to indicate what fraction is colored into your coloring sheet. Okay, so if you've done that and are happy with that, I'd like you to try the next few questions. There are 6 questions on each page, so you would need to prepare 6 pieces of square paper. Don't make them too big, because then you don't have to color a whole lot of spaces, and also you can have a small piece of square paper to stick it into your book for each of the questions. I'd like you to do exactly like what you did for the example, and pause the video, and when you finish, come back to check the answers. Have you finished? Let's look at the answers. Mark your answers in your book. So, what about subtraction? Well, it's exactly the same paper fold. You can probably use the one you already done. Okay? And if you look at the screen here, instead of transferring the green squares or blue squares on the other side onto the first side, because we're subtracting, really, we should just cross out the number of squares represented by what we're taking away, okay? Like this. Cross one square out, cross the other square out. I've also done it on my new piece of paper, but you could probably use the original one. Just remember, instead of adding the 2 green squares, you cross 2 yellow squares out. Okay? And the final answer is 1/6. And in your math book, the working out should include these intermediate steps. I'm going to give you a set of subtraction questions right now to try. They will have the same numbers as the previous addition questions. So you will be able to use the sheet of coloring folding paper that you've made just now. So for the subtraction questions in your math book, I don't need you to make another folding sheet to stick in, but I do need this section. Yeah, so the working out of each step written in your math book. Right, here are the questions. So pause the video now, go ahead and do them, and when you finish, come back and check the answers. Have you finished? Alright, come and check the answers, mark your own answers. Right, that's all for today. We'll do some related questions next time. Bye for now.